Happy New Year's Eve, everyone, and welcome to the Early Edge. It's the College Football Playoff Show. We are brought to you by BetMGM. Make it legendary. My name is Sia Nejad, and we've got a great show lined up for you today. We got a lot of games that matter. The College Football Playoff games, we're going to go over all of those. And, of course, we got some other games to talk about as well. Let's go ahead and bring in the stars of the show. We've got an elite cast here with Emory Hunt, with Mike McClure. And Mike, I'm going to start with you. We want to start with the Cotton Bowl. That game is tonight at 7:30, Miami and Ohio State. But let's just reset what's going on right now, because we've had a lot of bowl games where we're not exactly sure what matters to who and who's opting in, who's opting out, who's injured. These games matter. Are you in a position now to kind of like reset on what feels like almost like NFL games? Like these games are important, if you will.
Yeah, definitely resetting, definitely important. It's nice to that. You know, those games are every game ever is important to someone, right? Some of those bowl games, not important to me at this point. These are, though. So, yeah, very much looking forward to the college football playoff continuing. I get that we like to build things up and to hype it, and you've got holiday schedules and everything. I would love it if we didn't drag it out so long from the end of the regular season. I understand why we do, and it's nice to be back. Can't wait for these games.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you want some games that matter in terms of significance of the moment. And because we're now getting into these postseason games that that will ultimately decide a national champion, these are the games that you kind of care about more so than others. You used to care about the other bowl games, but when guys start to opt out and not play, it took away a draft evaluation, and they become glorified spring games, which is fine. But even then, you can't get excited because these freshmen and sophomores that you're watching out there playing these bowl games may end up transferring at the end of the season anyway. So it really just dampens the bowl season. But these games here definitely are exciting.
Yeah, and I harken back, Emory, to what you and Mike talked about many weeks ago about maybe changing these bowl games from a timing standpoint to the beginning of the season. You can still retain, Mike, like you had always said, the corporate sponsors and all that, and still have that money in play. But you kind of have games that matter at the end of the day if you flip it around a little bit. All right, let's go to the first game that matters, if you will. The Cotton Bowl, it's Miami, it's Ohio State. And Emory, I'm going to start with you. It's a 9.5-point spread, a pretty low total here, 40.5. Let's get your favorite pick on a side.
I will take Miami plus 9.5. I like this game to look a lot like what we saw the A&M Miami game in terms of a pace perspective. I think you have two very good defenses, two solid run games. Miami's run game, I feel like, is a little bit better than Ohio State, especially Mark Fletcher being how he capped off the game against Texas A&M. So I like the run game of Miami to shrink this ball game. Now, if Carson Beck, with all that experience, can outplay the true freshman or the redshirt freshman Julian Sand, then they can win this ball game. But if they can just get marginally better in the passing game, which I expect, it'll definitely keep this game close. 9.5 feels like a lot of points to me. So give me the Hurricanes plus the points here.
And I'm going to lean the other way with Ohio State. It is obviously a huge spread when you're talking about a college football playoff game that's not one of those opening round games. I look at this Ohio State team, though. They won last year. They basically have been, on paper, the best team in college football. And they're coming in off a loss. And that's a rare situation for them. I think the motivation's there. They're healthy, the rest. Miami, the issue for me is just offensively. Can they score enough points here and not turn the football over trying to do it? I think that Ohio State defensively has the bodies to really contain a guy like Toney, which I think is obviously the X factor for the Miami Hurricanes. So while it's a big number, I think it's one that could frankly even be competitive for 3.5 quarters. Miami down a score late, has to go for it on fourth down, puts Ohio State in a short field. They have that touchdown to seal the game and ultimately cover. So I'd be on Ohio State if I had to play this one.
Yeah, Malachi Toney going to have to play a big part for Miami, including, I'll say, Mark Fletcher as well. We have a prop coming up on him. Mike, really quick follow-up before we get to our favorite total in this game. You mentioned how you wish these games started a little bit earlier, maybe a couple of weeks ago. Knowing that Ohio State has been off since their narrow loss to Indiana, do you factor that in? I understand it's not quantifiable, but do you factor that in any way, whether it's Ohio State or any of these other teams that haven't played in a little while?
I think it can be factored in. I like the fact that they came in off of a loss, right? So when I would be worried about Ohio State in this kind of spot would have been the scenario where they essentially rout Indiana in that Big Ten game. They had no real competition, weren't really pushed in any way. At that point, it would have been for basically 2 months. But the fact is they came in off of a loss. That'll keep you hungry. That'll keep you motivated enough. So in this instance, I would not be worried about the layoff here for Ohio State.
Yeah, fair point. Coming off a win, maybe a different mindset for this Ohio State team. Let's go to a favorite total or team total. You can pick here, Emory. What's your favorite in this category?
I like the under of 40.5 points. When I look at this game, I feel like it'll be won in or lost in the trenches. And because the trench warfare is where we are right now in this juncture of the season, it is going to yield a lower scoring game, especially when you have some questions about the passing game of Miami or the consistency of the passing game. And Sayin versus a very tough defense. We saw him struggle a little bit, in my opinion, versus Indiana. Miami provides a lot of the same challenges up front, especially on the perimeter. I like this game to be a little bit slower pace, lower scoring, so I'll go under the total here.
And I'm going to back Ohio State in the first half. Going to go over the 13.5. I just think there are a number of scenarios where they do start hot in this game and ultimately land at 14-17 in the first half of this game. For me, it really comes down to just ideal conditions, perfect conditions for throwing those deep shots. That's critical for a young quarterback in Julian Sand like this. But this Miami defense, while they're good, I still think they might struggle at times containing both Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. I like this one to go over for Ohio State in the first half at 13.5.
All right, Mike, let me stick with you because you brought up Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. You like a anytime touchdown prop on Carnell Tate?
Yeah, we talk about Jeremiah Smith so much, and rightfully so. He's extremely, extremely talented. But Carnell Tate is not far behind. And I actually think Carnell Tate's game style fits the college football game just a little better, particularly in this matchup. I know that Jeremiah Smith is truly that elite athlete, but I think Carnell Tate's the one to watch in this particular game. And if he has any level of success, it's going to be nearly impossible for someone to beat this Ohio State team. But I like Carnell Tate to score the touchdown here, -110. I think that rushing touchdowns will be hard to come by for Ohio State. I think it's going to have to be on Julian Sand's arm through the air. And I think there's too big of a gap between Smith and Tate. Smith's numbers around -160 for an anytime. I thought they should both be around that -130 range.
Dan, with whom you brought to the party, we're at that juncture of the season as well. And Mark Fletcher really led these guys to a victory against Texas A&M. So I would expect him to be a focal point of this ball game. And if Miami's going to pull off the upset, Mark Fletcher's going to have to touch pay dirt. I do feel like we'll see him touch pay dirt at least one time in this ball game, by hook or by crook, by run game or passing game. Mark Fletcher with an anytime touchdown is where I'm going with my prop.
All right, Mark Fletcher, anytime touchdown at +110, and Carnell Tate, anytime touchdown at -110. Some great picks on this Ohio State-Miami game. I'm looking forward to it. We got that game tonight, and we've got 3 college football playoff games tomorrow. But ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested in picks like these from anyone in the SportsLine universe, and it is vast, go to sportsline.com/join. If you type in the promo code winners, you get 60% off the annual plan. Again, promo code winners at sportsline.com/join, 60% off the annual plan. If you type in the promo code winners, that gets you all the picks, some DFS picks, articles. We cover every sport. It also gives you the SportsLine Discord for free. All right, I mentioned it. We got more games to cover, college football playoff related. And I know at least one of the 2 analysts on this show has a very strong opinion on the Oregon Ducks. Oregon, Texas Tech, coming up next on the Early Edge. We're back on the Early Edge college football playoff show with Emory and Mike, and we move to Thursday at noon. It's the Orange Bowl. It's in Miami, and it's Oregon, Texas Tech. Mike, I got to start with you here because we did the Early Edge morning show on the SportsLine YouTube channel. Everybody out there, make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe to SportsLine. But, Mike, you had a pretty strong opinion on Oregon. And I will say this. When I look at lines like this and I see 2.5, Oregon favored by 2.5, 51.5 point total, sometimes I feel like, man, the book's just begging me to take it under that key number, right? That key number of 3. But you're going to oblige because you really like Oregon in this one.
Really like Oregon here, and I have defaulted and played everything on the money line here, Sia. This has been a position that I've been building for the last couple of weeks, and ultimately it's going to be my biggest bet of the entire season, just surpassing last week. I had a very strong take on Alabama over Oklahoma on the road in round one. That was the biggest play. I've since added a bunch more here. This is my classic pay to find out spot. Texas Tech to me is a team that's had an awesome season, right? Emory and I know we've talked about them at length. We like them. I just think they're a year early here. I think that they've had a great season. I think they're awesome defensively. I think the offense is going to struggle against better competition. One thing that really stands out to me about this Texas Tech team, though, is first of all, the offensive success rate running the football, nowhere near the top 60 in college football. That was playing against Big 12 defenses. And it really showed up on third down, right? 119th is where they rank in college football in terms of average distance to go on third down at 7.66 yards against Big 12 defenses, not against elite NFL talent on the other side. I think that's ultimately going to be the problem here. So I like Oregon. I like the fact that they gave up some points against JMU in the second half, kind of treating this as almost if they came in off of a loss. I like Oregon here in a big way to win this game.
I totally agree with you, Mike, and for a lot of the same reasons. When you watch their offense, you're like, wow, this is not very Texas Tech like. It feels very, I don't want to say gimmicky, but it feels as though if you rally, make a tackle, you're good. And when you look at that offense against a better defense and secondary that's not afraid to match up one-on-one, now you see a potential problem. Everything that we've talked and loved about Texas Tech has been about their defense, right? And their offensive line. So if you remove that from the equation, can they score on Oregon consistently? I don't think so. And can Oregon, with their offensive firepower at wide receiver, at quarterback, potential first round pick, if he decides to declare, many times at bat, you'll yield some hits, some scores, some runs. And I think that's what's going to happen here. So I like Oregon to win this one. I just trust Texas Tech's defense more than their offense. And in the game against a solid defense, I trust Oregon's offense versus a very good Texas Tech defense to get enough points to where they cover and also win the game.
Yeah. By the way, Mike, I do appreciate you managing to fit in a mention of James Madison University, my alma mater. Let's go to the total. It's 51.5. Emory, I'm going to start with you here. You talked about the Texas Tech defense being very formidable, particularly their front seven. I think there's some issues on the back end potentially. I say potentially because you could make the argument that Texas Tech hasn't faced a ton of great quarterbacks this year. Enter Dante Moore, who I'm sure when you bring out your draft guide in the offseason, I'm sure he's going to be set to be a top 5 pick. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this total is 51.5. And I expect Oregon to put up some points. Do you like the over here?
Love the over. And yes, when the best draft guide in existence comes out, you already know where you get the valuable, great information from. You know what I'm saying? We'll post that link later. But yes, go over. And the reason why is because when you think about a very good defense, what could destroy a defense that wants to get upfield and get after the quarterback? The athletic, mobile quarterback. And I think that's where you're going to see Dante Moore really play above the X's and O's, scramble for some yards, maybe scramble for some big plays, maybe scramble to throw down the field. But because he has that ability to move away from the target, it changes your rush lanes for Texas Tech. It really is going to calm down that pressure coming off the edge and allow those receivers to win one-on-one on the perimeter. I think that's where we'll see the big plays come from. I expect this one to go over 51.5 for sure in this game.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to go over on Oregon's team total at 27.5. I think this is a decent spot to look for points from Oregon, win or lose. Certainly hope they win, think they win this game, but I think their median outcome here is going to be between 28 and 35 points with upside of 40. I get that this Texas Tech defense has been good. Again, have to consider the level of the competition that they're playing. I like Dan Lanning. I think that he's being slept on just a little bit here. I know that Oregon's a team that always has championship aspirations. They kind of get overshadowed a little bit right now with not only Ohio State, but the emergence of Indiana in that conference. But I still think they're one of the best teams, and they've got the athletes to do it. I think that they have the edge here in terms of coaching as well. Give me Oregon to put up at least 28 points in this game.
And Emory, I want to give you a shout out for your draft guide. I don't have the link handy, but I know everybody can find it at FBall Game Plan on X or Twitter if you still want to call it that. I certainly do. Let's move forward. You got to follow Mike and Emory on Twitter. There's a lot of good stuff going on there. Player or game prop, and we have agreement here with the Texas Tech quarterback. Mike, start us off.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be tough sledding for that Texas Tech offense. Going to go Baron Morton under on passing yards, 235.5. Yes, I know this looks more like an NFL number than a college number, but I think it's for good reason. I think that Oregon is very underrated defensively, and I thought what Emory mentioned was key here. This is an Oregon defense that is not going to be afraid to play one-on-one, and I think they're going to have a lot of success because they're going to be able to get to the quarterback quickly by being willing to put some of those defensive backs in those one-on-one situations. I just think Morton struggles here, and I think the offense struggles, so under on passing yards.
The reason why we saw JMU have some success offensively against Oregon was the Alonzo Barnett factor, and the fact that he's a dynamic mobile quarterback that can create. That changes things and it forces you to be a little bit more disciplined, and it will yield some big plays at times. You won't have to fear that from Baron Morton, especially if you don't respect their run game, which Mike touched on earlier perfectly. So they can't run the football. Your quarterback is not a +1. That just screams this passing number is going to be a tough sledding for him all throughout the game. So I will go under that total for sure.
The JMU mention count is at 2. I see what you did there, Emory Hunt. Really appreciate it. All right, that's going to cover it for this Oregon-Texas Tech game for now. We'll get into our best bets at the end of the show, and we'll see if one of these bets makes it there. But up next, it's the Rose Bowl. It's Alabama. It's Indiana. It's Mike. It's Emory. It's coming up next on the Early Edge. It's time to talk Rose Bowl. We've got Indiana. We've got Alabama. We've got a 7.5 point spread, depending on where you look. 7 here at BetMGM, 48.5 point total. Emory, I'm going to start with you on a side. This feels like a pretty big number, but there's certainly arguments for both sides here. What do you like, Emory?
You know, I like Alabama plus the points here. I feel like we'll get this game to be more along the lines of 24-20, something like that, because we can't just ignore Alabama is still Alabama in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And that's going to make this a rubber match. It's going to look a lot like what we saw Indiana, Ohio State look like. Now, the difference is everything that's outside of the point of attack play. But in terms of right there in the trenches, it'll make it a slower paced game, a lower scoring game. And I do like Alabama to keep this one within striking distance because, again, Indiana doesn't beat themselves. They force you to play discipline. That could be the difference in Alabama losing the game or winning the game, but it definitely plays a part in how this game will be scored. So I look for this to be a tighter game. So give me them plus 6.5.
Yeah, give me the points here. I played this as soon as it came out on the SportsLine site. It's 7.5. I think that Alabama is live to win this game outright, guys. I know that they've limped into the playoff. They've had the time to recover, though. No team needed a little time off more than Alabama. And you saw what they were capable of still coming back from the 17-0 deficit on the road in an environment like Norman, Oklahoma. This will be nothing close to that when you talk about the hostile environment. It's a neutral site, but honestly, guys, the thing that I can't get away from here is you look at Alabama, even in their beat up state, playing against Georgia in a neutral site in the SEC title game. Spread on that game closed at 1.5. We are now saying that we think that this Indiana team is nearly 5.5 to 6 points better than the Georgia Bulldogs on a neutral site. I personally do not agree with that. I'm not ready to move that far. You asked me earlier, see if I'm worried about a team with a little bit of a layoff. Indiana is exactly the team that I'm worried about after a layoff. You have the massive celebration, the big high of beating Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. You lose one of your best defensive players celebrating after that game, no longer available for the playoff. Alabama battle tested. This will be a one-score game.
Yeah, you mentioned Stephen Daly. I mean, what a freak injury. It's just a sad story for him, frankly. But obviously, that defensive line, takes a little bit of a hit. Real quick follow-up, Emory. I mean, did you factor that in at all? I mean, they already had a defensive lineman out. Stephen Daly now out. He was just high-fiving fans, trying to be friendly with the fans, comes down very awkwardly. Is that something that you factored in here? Because we're talking about the interiors. We're talking about the trenches. I feel like that's a bit of a loss for Indiana.
I did. And when you look at a team like we saw this when LSU played Florida State, when Mason Smith was a highly touted defensive lineman, and was celebrating and tore his ACL, was out for the season. It affected LSU the rest of that game in the Superdome. And I do feel like when you're Indiana versus a team like Alabama and or Georgia, you're talking about winning within the margins. You have to be better than them, not only in the front line starters, but also with your second wave. If your second wave is a step down in Alabama's second wave, not only just from a talent standpoint, but from a body type standpoint. So not having, your guys on the interior versus this particular team and matchup makes it a difficult task for you to play your style of game on defense. It's still very good, especially on the corners, especially as a total defense perspective. But man, that's a huge loss for the Hoosiers.
All right, let's go to a favorite total, team total, first half bet. Mike, what do you have for the Rose Bowl?
I'll go first half under here, obviously. Anytime you get a key number like 24 and a half, 24 and 23, both just so key in the first half of a football game. I think it's a slower scoring game early in this one. When you look at Alabama, I think that they're a little underrated defensively still. And I think that Indiana, while we just talked about losing a little bit of depth on that defensive line, I think they're still a great defensive team. And I think that where they're going to struggle is offensively. So I think it's a slow mover early, going to fade a bunch of scoring in the first half, under 24 and a half.
I want to go under 48 and a half for the total. And the reason why I like the total to go under, we talked about it earlier, where this is going to be a tighter game because of how Indiana plays and how Alabama is built in the trenches on both sides of the ball. We'll see them challenge those wide receivers of Indiana. They'll force Fernando Mendoza to make consistent tight window throws. The back shoulder throw will have to be in effect. And when you're facing a team like Alabama that can play one-on-one really tough, it makes that pass in that particular situation very difficult. So we'll learn a lot about Fernando Mendoza against this particular defense. So I would like this one to go under. I think it will go under 24-20 is the score I have for these two.
All right, we go from a couple of unders to a couple of overs in our player prop department. We got two receivers to talk about. Emory, kick us off.
Jeremy Bernard going over 50 and a half. He's the one Alabama receiver that has been consistently good throughout the course of the season. If Ryan Williams can show up in this ball game, man, that changes the math versus Indiana's secondary. But you can at least count on Jeremy Bernard to show up. So I like him to go over 50 and a half yards.
And Ryan Williams is going to show up in this game, at least show up to the tune of 31 receiving yards, over 30 and a half for a guy that we've seen have 165 in a game this season. We know the upside that he represents. It's frankly probably been frustrating if you've backed this prop often. I think some of the time off, but I really think it's ultimately the stakes of the game. He didn't really get involved much in the first one. A lot of that was Oklahoma's defense. When you look at what he did in that game against Georgia, just 2 catches, still got over this number, getting 33 yards. I think that he cares a lot about the stakes of this game, and I think that they've got some things designed intentionally for Ryan Williams, who has been a little missing in action at times down the stretch. But I'm still just betting on raw talent here, and the fact that you're a touchdown or more underdog in a do-or-die game. There's definitely a scenario where you're peppered with targets in the second half here. So over 30 and a half receiving yards for Ryan Williams.
I agree with you that I think there might be some designed stuff for Ryan Williams early in this game to kind of get him going, because I do think they're going to need a little bit of that receiving game, particularly from Ryan Williams, who I think there were some comments about maybe he'd be in the transfer portal or something like that. He shot that down within the last couple of days, I believe, or at least the last few days. So I think that's kind of good news for Alabama fans, because I think he will rebound. Quick question, Emory. I want to ask you about Fernando Mendoza. I talked earlier in the show about how, you put out your draft guide on Football Game Plan, and you don't only cover the big ticket players. I mean, you are really, I think, super popular because you're covering the FCS players who might be entering the draft, some of the smaller conferences, smaller schools. But let's talk about a big ticket player in Fernando Mendoza, because there was a lot of chatter about, hey, this guy might be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft this year. Your thoughts on Fernando Mendoza as an NFL prospect?
I do think he can be a starter in the NFL, but when we're talking about top 10, top 5, number 1 overall, we're talking about difference makers and game changers. When you look at what Curtis Rourke did with this very similar Indiana team, had those guys in the postseason, and you look at what Fernando Mendoza has done, very similar, Indiana team, and they have similar statistics and play the same way. Rourke was more of an athlete, but what makes Rourke's season even more impressive, he did it on 1 ACL. We didn't find out he had a torn ACL until after the season. He played a whole season with a torn ACL. So I think he's a solid player, more of a second round type talent. And people will say that's blasphemous, but man, you can win with the Jalen Hurts. You can win with the Brock Purdy. You can win with the Bo Nix. You don't have to force feed a quarterback at number one overall. Make sure your ecosystem is worthy of accepting a quarterback to go in there and do his 111. So if people just readjusted how they thought about program building and franchise building, we wouldn't see as many whiffs in the first round, high in the first round on these quarterbacks. So would I take Fernando Mendoza number one overall? Probably not. Would I like him as a starter of my football team? Sure, absolutely. You can win games with him with how he plays. But in terms of first round talent, second round talent, or top 10 talent, there's a line of demarcation there. And there he is right under the line.
Yeah, quickly, all I would add is he will get drafted, no doubt. I don't think he's the number one overall pick. I don't think he should be in the top 10. I do think he will find himself on an NFL roster very clearly and could really progress and potentially be a starter. The one thing that concerns me here, 27 of 33 touchdowns this season have come against Kennesaw State, Indiana State, Illinois, Michigan State, UCLA, Wisconsin, and Purdue. The other games, he had the other 6 touchdowns where they came against good teams like Iowa's defense, Oregon, Penn State, if you even want to call them a good team, and then Ohio State. 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in those games. So when he's played strong, tough competition, he's been far from the best quarterback in college football.
Ouch. Penn State fans, write your hate tweets over to Mike McClure. One quick follow-up, Emory and Mike, and this is really hard to quantify, but as a JMU fan, I saw Curt Cignetti build that program up from, the FCS level, or D1 AA, if you will, to Division I, and it's just a really good program in spite of the fact that obviously they've lost all of their offensive starters in the last few days. But then he goes to Indiana and builds that program up, and we're now talking about Indiana potentially winning it all. Emory, is it possible to quantify where Curt Cignetti is in the coaching landscape? I mean, would you say he's a top 3 coach, or is that more for just sports talk radio? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how we explain Curt Cignetti.
He is definitely a top 3 coach, because I'll go back even further. He did it at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And if you know anything about Division II scholarships and how you have to divvy up money, there's not that many full scholarships. So you have to give money out to different players. In Western PA, you're competing with Slippery Rock. You're competing with Westchester and Eastern PA, but all in the same conference. You're dealing with Cal University of Pennsylvania. So he's recruiting in that tough Division II conference in Pennsylvania with partial scholarships that he has to divvy out, and those IUP teams were dominant. So yes, he knows how to develop talent, he knows how to cultivate talent, and he's a great in-game coach as well. So yes, top 3 coach by far.
100% agree. He's absolutely incredible as a coach. And part of it's the reason why we may like taking Bama and some of these other teams against them is he's doing so much with a lot less when it comes to like the athletes that he's got that he inherited or bringing in. They're still not really on par with some of the other schools yet. I think he will get there. The one thing I will say, if they cover the 7 or 7.5 against Alabama, I will finally Google the man.
He did order that some time ago. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on from Indiana. We're going to go to Ole Miss, and we're going to go to Georgia. We got to go to the Sugar Bowl, and we got a lot to talk about in this one next on the Early Edge. We're back on CBS Sports Network, and it's time to cover the Sugar Bowl. It's Ole Miss, it's Georgia. It's a 55.5 point total, Emory, and a 6.5 point spread. Again, and this isn't a universal thing to me, but today I'm seeing 6.5s, I'm seeing 2.5s, and I'm seeing like, hey man, I think they really want me to take this 6.5 here. Either way, what do you like, Emory?
I like Georgia. I'm going to lay the 6.5 with the Bulldogs. I love Ole Miss. I love their story. I love the quarterback and how quiet is kept. He's the only one on that team that has national championship experience because he won one at Division II Ferris State. So he's not going to shrink in these moments. But I think the difference here is how Georgia handles the point of attack. Now, Ole Miss was able to push Tulane up and down the field on both sides of the line of scrimmage. That won't happen against Georgia. So they'll have to play a different game. They'll find ways to score. And like they did in the first matchup when this game was going back and forth and they had a lead in that ball game. But I just feel like Georgia over time will lean more on their run game that has gotten better as the season went on. They have their own version of Trinidad Chambliss on the other side and Gunnar Stockton, who's a gamer, big fan of him and how he plays. So This can go back and forth, but I think Georgia has enough in the trenches and also enough in the run game, in combination with their trenches, because Ole Miss can run the ball too, to cover this spread.
Yeah, look, you talk about quarterbacks, both of them, as Emory mentioned, absolute gamers. I would make the case that Trinidad Chambliss may be the best college football quarterback in the college football playoff. Maybe not necessarily profiling to play at the next level, but given what we've seen right now, he can absolutely will his team to a win, or at least to being competitive in a lot of these games. Missing, I'm kicking myself for missing this at 7.5. I made the number 4.5 here. I get why it's not going to be there. I think we could see an exact repeat of what we saw. Tight, competitive game. Georgia finds a way late. Ole Miss has to turn the ball over trying, and Georgia ultimately covers in the final few minutes of this game. But I like this Ole Miss team. The thing that, I backed them a lot on this show, frankly, all over the course of the season. The one thing that's different about this Ole Miss team from years past is they're actually good defensively. They finally shored things up on the defensive side of the ball. They can generate a pass rush. They're very competitive on that side. So personally, a lot of familiarity in the matchup. I think it's a tight one-score game. Definitely have the concern that Georgia covers in the final minute or two of this one, but I'd play Ole Miss here plus 6.5.
All right, well, let's go from the final minute to the first few minutes, Mike. I'm surprised that we're 40 minutes into this show. Now we're getting to the favorite total of this game. And 40 minutes into the show, we haven't had a first quarter bet. Or I think we might have had a first half bet. I'm not sure. But you are known, at least in part, for some of these first quarter angles. So talk to me about a first quarter under.
Yeah, give me first quarter under 13.5 here. And while it certainly is very rarely comfortable to bet first quarter unders in college football, there's been versions of this game where we're talking about a 7-7 game 6 minutes in. And that's fully on the table with the offensive skill set these teams have. I just think they play it a little closer to the vest early. And I think that these teams are underrated defensively. So while I do think we get an opening quarter touchdown on one side, I'm not sure that we get both. I actually could see a scenario where a fourth down conversion is stopped in the red zone and just ultimately doesn't result in points. So I'm going to go under 13.5 here in the first quarter.
I'll take the full game under 55.5. I know, we look at last time they played, it was a back and forth game, 43-35. But this is now the postseason. This is now experience over everything. And the experience that Kirby Smart has in these situations, he's going to call and manage a different type of a ball game. He wants to make it close to where he forces the opponent to make the mistakes that they're not used to making in a high leverage situation. That these guys, Georgia, have been in this place, done that thing, and bought the t-shirt many times over. So I like the under here. We're looking more toward a 24-20 type game once again, as opposed to the 43-35 game we got earlier in the season.
Emory, did I miss it before we get to our player props? Have you been swapping the helmets out for each segment? I noticed Ole Miss and Georgia in the background there. Did I miss that on the first three segments?
Not only do I have great football knowledge, put out the best draft guide in existence at footballgameplan.com/2026 draft guide, but I also understand set design. Yes, I've been changing the helmets for every matchup, and we got all the helmets. Any matchup you want to throw out there, we got it. If you want to get out there and go to the Kirk Cignetti Bowl, I'll put the IUP helmet up. I'll put the JMU helmet up. I'll put the Indiana helmet up. I'll put his future, New York Giants head coach helmet up. Whatever you guys want, I can do.
I was so distracted by the early edge mug on the top shelf that I didn't even see the helmets. I host the show, The Early Edge, on the SportsLine YouTube channel. I don't even have that mug. I don't.
And you got the CBS Sports Network mug, the channel we on. If we was on, if we was on Paramount Plus, I have a Paramount Plus mug.
Can I talk to some people about getting some gear and some what memorabilia from CBS? I just got some pictures in my background. All right, let's move along. Player props. Emory, I'll start with you. By the way, Trinidad Chambliss, we got props on Trinidad and Gunnar Stockton. You mentioned gamers, Mike. I think it was you that used that word. These are two of the best college football names all time, in my opinion. Emory Hunt, talk to me about a prop you like.
Yeah, Gunnar Stockton looks 23 and 43 at the same time. I love that for him, man. Like, he's the college version of Benjamin Button. So, yes, I like Gunnar Stockton to get an anytime touchdown. His athleticism, just like Trinidad Chambliss, changes everything. So just when you think you got him covered on the back end, boom, he's out the door and he's scrambling for, 20-plus yards or getting a touchdown. I think we'll see him do that inside the red zone, which would be the one thing Ole Miss should account for, but teams always tend to account for it, but they really can't stop him. So I like him to get an anytime touchdown here.
Yeah, exact same play just on Trinidad Chambliss, plus 170, the anytime touchdown number. A little interesting to me to see that big of a number hung on this one. In the previous matchup, he had 2 rushing touchdowns against Georgia. He runs the ball often. We've seen many games this season where we're having 14, 15, 16 rushing attempts. When you talk about a do or die situation in a I call him a veteran presence. I know it wasn't all necessarily at this level. I think he's going to have to create. I think that Georgia's defense is going to be good enough to really limit some of the downfield passing. You talk about Lacey in the backfield being there. Certainly adds some additional attention in the red zone. I think Trinidad Chambliss absolutely has red zone carries here, and I think he lands in the end zone.
Quick follow-up, Emory. I mean, obviously, some of the headlines for Ole Miss over the last, I don't know, month, 5 weeks have been the fact that Lane Kiffin has left the program. Now, I mean, this game's in New Orleans. And of course, he's the head coach of LSU. Any thoughts on, A, whether that's going to affect Ole Miss in this game and to what degree, but also, you think Lane's showing up for this one?
Baton Rouge is only an hour away from New Orleans, 42 minutes if you hit the highway like you're supposed to, right? And you get there pretty quickly. But it wouldn't surprise me to see him in the building, in the press box, with a cell phone, a Nokia cell phone that used to be the Sugar Bowl sponsor, flip phone, calling down the sideline, making some play calls. So I wouldn't put anything past, Lane Kiffin in this game. I wouldn't put anything past anything happening in this Super Bowl or Sugar Bowl game in this era of no rules of college football. We may even see him be a referee. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? Like, anything goes nowadays. There's no rules.
That's so true. That's a great way to close the segment. Anything goes in college athletics in general, for better or for worse. All right, we got to move on to best bets. Ladies and gentlemen, coming up next on the Early Edge, we go to and through our best bets, talk about some underdog plays and some non-college football playoff bets. Coming up next on the Early Edge. Let's take a look at the best bets graphic on the season. Here's the tracker. Emory last week goes 1-1, Mike 1-1, and Tom trying to fight back goes 2-0. Emory battling to even, still down around 4 units on the season. Mike McClure up over 10 units on the season. How about we get some best bets from Emory Hunt and Mike? And I'll tell you what, Emory, let's start with you. You've got a couple of bets on teams, non-college football playoff teams that we haven't talked about yet.
Firstly, I will not go against any one of the armed forces in the bowl game. We always ask the question, who wants to be there? Who wants to play? We know they want to be there. They want to play. They take the game seriously, and they will blow the doors off whoever they play because of the uniqueness of their offense and how disciplined they are as a whole. So lay the 7.5 points with Navy in their bowl game. And I also like the game between Arizona and SMU, 2 very good football teams, solid quarterback play, a lot of playmakers across the board, over 52.5 points. That'll be another one of these rare, exciting bowl games that we'll see on the slate. Competitive game, back and forth, but definitely take the over in the point total.
All right, we're going back to Oregon. I'm sure if you watched the show earlier to this point or the Early Edge or a SportsLine member, I am backing the Oregon Ducks here on the money line, minus 125, just my classic pay to find out spot on Texas Tech. I love Texas Tech. I've backed them a lot this season. I think they're a year early at this particular level. Great defensive line, quarterback play, certainly not the answer. They're going to struggle in this game offensively. They're going to be in 3rd and long routinely, and Oregon has the athletes and the defensive mindset to play one-on-one, get to the quarterback, make life difficult. Give me the Oregon Ducks here. I made the number in this game just over 3. The money line price should be minus 147, and I think we continue to trend towards that by the time this game kicks off. So give me Oregon here on the money line, and then Alabama plus 7.5. I love the SEC where it just means more. I will pay to find out if Kurt Cignetti and company can cover the 7 or 7.5. Now I played this at 7.5 at minus 124 over on the SportsLine site. I think it'll still bounce between 7 and 7.5 between kickoff. When I look at this particular matchup, I think the sentiment couldn't be any more opposite. Alabama kind of at the low. Indiana at the peak, at the all-time high in terms of their market value. Again, when you compare these two teams and then the Georgia line, this is essentially saying that Indiana is 6 points better than Georgia on a neutral field. I refuse to believe that at this particular point until they prove me wrong. Give me Alabama here behind a good defensive performance, doing just enough to cover the spread at 7.5.
Certainly feels like a lot of points. Let's take a look at the best bets for this week's games. Best bet number one for Emory Hunt is Navy minus 7.5. That was at even money. And Arizona SMU over 52.5. Mike McClure going with Oregon money line. Sounded like it was his favorite bet of the year. Alabama plus 7.5. And he did mention that it was 7.5 when he put it on SportsLine. We told you how to become SportsLine members. Just go to sportsline.com/join and type in the promo code winners for 60% off the annual plan. Let's go to our underdog bet of the week. Mike, I'll start with you this time. And now it doesn't have to be an underdog per se. How about a plus money play or an underdog?
It's an underdog play. The dogs will be barking in Ole Miss and Georgia, one way or another, whether Ole Miss wins or the Georgia Bulldogs win. How about the number here, though? Plus 200, 2-to-1 shot on Ole Miss to figure it out. They were competitive in this game in the regular season. This version of Ole Miss is much better defensively than they have been in years past. And I like the quarterback situation. Trinidad Chambliss, I think, is an absolute gamer, to quote Emory Hunt. I think he figures out a way. He's got a lot of experience in big games, albeit at a different level. He's shown time and time again that he belongs in this particular spot. And what better drama would we have for Lane Kiffin to get another $250,000 or $300,000 check from Ole Miss for winning this game? I think all the drama in the world here if Ole Miss goes on a little run, plus 200 here.
Outside of my ability to be a tremendous background set designer, when I was young, I wasn't gifted and talented. Now, here's the thing, my thought process should have been like, hey, man, this doesn't particularly make the best rational sense to me. But in my inner city upbringing and my, not really grasping of words, as a second grader, I'm like, people are playing dumb on purpose. That doesn't sound good in terms of what you should say in that situation. I'm saying this because the game I'm going to, Illinois State versus Montana State, the FCS championship. And the reason why I brought all that up is because here's their championship game Monday, January 5th, after a 24-team playoff that has gotten done and finished with extra weeks to spare, and you have a championship game right there, January 5th, saying that the FBS can do the same exact thing, but we're playing dumb on purpose, to quote the second grade 7-year-old Emory Hunt. So give me Illinois State plus 7.5. You know why Illinois State got here? Because they upset number 1 overall Titan, North Dakota State, which people claim in the FBS can never happen. So at the end of the day, this is why I brought you there to bring you here. Give me Illinois State plus 10.5 in the FCS championship game.
I mean, you're aging yourself a little bit, Emory, because I feel like gifted and talented is no more. It's AP now, I guess, advanced placement. Either way, very impressive. All right, let's talk about a favorite bet for a non-college football playoff game. Now, Mike, I know you abstained from this one. You're kind of locked in on the college football playoff games. Emory, before you go, I just want to mention that on the Early Edge Morning Show, again, on the SportsLine YouTube channel, I gave out Duke at 2 o'clock today, over 24.5 team total. So that's something I like. Emory, what do you like?
Texas, Arch Manning and company looking to run up the score against Michigan. All kind of stuff going on in the state of Michigan, from Michigan State to Michigan. Only team that right now that's coming out clean in Michigan is, shout out to Tony and Nice at Ferris State, Division II national champions. They went out there and got the job done against Harding. So I like Texas to blow out Michigan, lay the 7.5 points with the Longhorns.
Emory, can you give me 15 seconds on what your sweatshirt says real quick? We got 15 seconds. Was All Juice? What does that say, Emory?
All Juice team. Shout out to the late, great Therese Paylor, great columnist, great founder of the All Juice team. Used to come out after the combine. So love the fact that we still can represent the great Therese Paylor and his family and his legacy with these sweatshirts. You'll see a lot of media members rocking these sweatshirts, and that's where we got it from.
I want one too, Emory. Thanks for that shout out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you want more like this, join the SportsLine YouTube channel. I host a show every Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock on that SportsLine YouTube channel. It's the Early Edge. Catch it here as well. Check out the NFL show next with Claudia, RJ, Larry, and Will. Have a great day, everybody. Happy New Year.